Welcome to another episode of Exercise Matters with me, Randall Cooper.
And me, Mick Hughes.
Support for today's episode comes from Premax Performance Skincare. If you're active, you focus on strength, endurance and recovery. But what about your skin? Sweat, friction and the elements take a toll. That's where Premax comes in. High-performance skincare made for high-performance people. From recovery creams to anti-chafe balms, massage creams to exercise-specific barrier creams, we help your skin go the distance. Keep your skin as fit as your body with Premax. Available now at premax.co.
And support for today's episode also comes from Learn.Physio. Health professionals, are you staying ahead of the game? Learn.Physio brings you cutting-edge education from world-class experts in sports and musculoskeletal medicine. Online courses, hands-on practicals and expert resources, all backed by the latest evidence and designed to fit into your busy schedule. To be your best, learn from the best. Get started today at Learn.Physio. G'day, mate.
Well, g'day, Mick. Hope you're going well. How are you? What's your update? You've kind of made a feature of kind of giving little snippets into your exercise routines over the last few episodes. So I'm now waiting with bated breath at the start of each of one to see what you're up to.
Yeah, I agree. I think the listeners really are following on very closely to see how far and how deep I'm going with the Norwegian 4x4. It's going tremendously well, I must admit. Rough count, I'm 4 weeks in to the complete program. 4 minutes on, 3 minutes off, repeat by 4. Twice a week, consistently twice a week. Every now and again, if I get a Sunday, if I get a Saturday afternoon off from the household duties, I'll sneak in a third one as well. Yeah, loving it. Feeling fitter, feeling stronger. What I really enjoy watching my heart rate come back down. That's the thing I've probably noticed the most is after I've reached my peak heart rate level, which kind of is tapping out about 1/8 most efforts. I'm just really enjoying that acceleration in my heart rate recovery, which is a nice measure of fitness. So yeah, I'm motivated. I probably haven't loved high intensity work as much as what I currently am doing and feeling right now. I've previously just found it really challenging, uncomfortable. And don't get me wrong, this is bloody hard, but it's not as hard as some of the other stuff I've done in the past. So yeah, I'm here for it.
That's excellent. I think you'll be interested because as you know, like we're prepping for another couple of episodes in this series 2 of Exercise Matters on Zone 2. So I've got a terrific guest lined up in a couple of episodes to talk through it. And part of I'm already starting to read the background behind it. What I'm starting to kind of really dig my teeth into and really enjoying is the interaction between HIIT and 4x4s with the Zone 2 work, and also how that relates to what they call in the grey zone, which is the middle kind of between high intensity work and the Zone 2 stuff. So I think that when we kind of get through that, hopefully we start to really build out a fuller picture over on aerobic endurance training. And that should help round it out, which I'm looking forward to. I hope you are too, mate.
Me too. I'm glad that it fits nicely. It's not a either or situation because I'm actually enjoying this 4x4 because if you're convincing me to go Zone 2, I'm just gonna, I'm just this human guinea pig at the moment and I'll be flipping and flopping and changing all my protocols around. So I would like something that just sort of slides a line nicely into my current regime, please. Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll hit pause on that, and I will have good and bad news for you on that front. So that anyway, we'll kind of get to that in a couple of weeks. Hope everyone looks forward to that. Now, I got another question for you, mate, and that is do you spend too much time on social media? Do you find that you're scrolling too much? And if you're scrolling too much, do you think that it affects you in any way?
I would do. Like I've probably also too am a product of being, but obviously Learn.Physio. I need to be online to a certain capacity with what we do, obviously promoting podcasts and doing the Exercise Matters and my own ACL sort of channels on social media. I'd be the first to admit I do spend a lot of time on social media. From a personal, I guess, point of view, it actually has increased, I must admit, this year. Like, me just doom scrolling, for example, or just scrolling through Instagram Reels. I've caught myself a number of times in the last probably 6 months, more than what I can really recall ever. Because I would hand on heart say any time on social media in the past would be more so for work purposes, whereas this year probably have shifted. And I've seen it creep in a few times where, yeah, I'd be, sitting on the toilet, for example, just going through Instagram Reels and going, geez, I've been here far too long than what I need to. Or, in my lunch breaks, at work, just sort of getting through social media Reels. Yeah, I would be the first to put my hand up and say, yeah, it's increased this year for whatever reason it has. But I think for me, consciously, I know and I can catch myself before I get into like a 2-hour waste of time, or I am up past, way past my bedtime. I can sort of catch myself before I, let it go on too long, which I think is the silver lining to my situation. What about you?
Well, at the moment, I'm just trying to I'm finding it difficult to get past the image of you sitting on the throne too long scrolling on your phone. That's going to live with me for quite a while. So I hope I can concentrate for the rest of this episode now. Oh, this one's going to make the bloopers. Oh, God. For me, I in some ways I'm the same, and I think that I think the worrying thing is across all the three major platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, the TikTokification of kind of the way things have gone, and now that you're basically just getting served entertainment, outrage, anything that's just going to keep you on that platform for a long period of time, just wants to keep you engaged. You're right. You can just sit there and just easily blow an hour and go, where did that time go? And the thing I think that's important is that it has an influence on you. Like, yes, it can waste time, but there's body of research that's kind of showing that it can help with mental health problems, distracts you at work. And I read a book last year. I don't know if you've kind of come across it, but there's a guy called Jonathan Haidt, spelled Haidt, and he wrote a book called The Anxious Generation. It's all about how kind of social media and phones have really influenced like younger people, and particularly younger females. And the changes are just so dramatic compared to the generation before. So that was interesting for me. And then I really started, after reading that book, I really wanted to think, does this actually affect physical performance? And does it have an influence on sport and exercise? So that's the basis behind this episode. And the short answer is it can, and it does. And I've got a terrific guest who's going to come on to give us some comments here. And his name's Stewart Cotterill, and I'll he's a professor. I'll kind of introduce him in a minute. But just to give you a brief overview of some research that's already out there, there's a paper that was published in Research Quarterly for Exercise and Sport by Forts et al. In 2022. And they looked at a bunch of swimmers, and the swimmers who use social media for 30 minutes before every training sessions showed no improvement in their training over an 8-week period, compared to those who instead watched motivational videos before every training session. They improved their times and also their endurance significantly. So just that window of kind of scrolling on social media before you train had a direct impact on their training performance. And that was then overlaid by another paper in Psychology of Sport and Exercise in 2024 by Pateswitz and Milano. And I love the title of this, Mick. It's called The Toll of the Scroll, A Path Towards Burnout. And they looked at 268 collegiate athletes, and they examined the relationship between Instagram and their use patterns, social comparison tendencies, and athlete burnout. And they found that athletes who spend more time browsing on Instagram reported higher levels of exhaustion, reduced accomplishment, and sport devaluation. They just felt that sport wasn't as important to them as what it used to be.
Wow.
And then the findings extrapolated that passive scrolling, rather than direct social comparison, is the key to burnout. So it's not only affecting performance, but also mental resilience and long-term motivation. So they're pretty powerful things for up and coming athletes, or any athletes of any level. Would you agree?
Yeah, agree. It's that's really concerning. Those, well, positively, like, the findings of the motivational videos and the pump up session before you go for a swim. But yeah, just that half hour scroll and that mindless scrolling and the knock on effect to performance, but how they how they enjoy sport and activity. That's a big concern, particularly for these developing brains. You know, like adults can probably handle some of this stuff a bit better. But yeah, that younger athlete that's really, almost like hooked on screens. Like I drive past bus stops every day, and the amount of kids that I see that are just, I'd say comfortably say 99% of the kids have got their head down on a phone, just scrolling away on the way to school, and that would be such a common thing that not just I see, you'd probably see the same as well. If that's just having an effect in their physical activity and exercise, that's a big worry.
Yeah. So at this point, I want to bring in Professor Stewart Cotterill. He's a leading sport and performance psychologist from the UK. He's published widely on applied sports psychology and athlete wellbeing, and he's co-authored early work on integrating social media and digital behaviour into performance settings. His recent research explores how technology and online pressures are shaping modern athletic performance. So the first question I asked Stewart was, where is the evidence currently and when it comes to social media and athletic performance?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, Randon. I think the honest answer is the evidence isn't where it should be. It's social media is like a big social experiment at the moment. The technology is developing much quicker than our understanding of the impact that it's having across the board. And it's similar for athletic performance as well. So there are a few studies that have looked at the impact of social media and athletic performance. There's an interesting study looking at Facebook use, found correlation between Facebook use prior to performance and stress and anxiety in athletes. There's studies that have anecdotally spoken to coaches across a number of sports, and where they've highlighted they believe that social media is having an impact on their athletes, though there's no numbers to back that up, no statistics. There are some broader studies underway at the moment. Actually, we've got a couple of research fellows who are looking at directly the impact of social media on athletic performance, because it's one of those things that's not really well researched, but looks like it's having a significant impact. I mean, if you're looking at 16 to 24-year-olds, they're spending on average about 3 hours a day on social media. That's a lot of time, and obviously we can talk through generally the impacts of social media on people, and athletes are people, so the impacts are the same, but in particular the way that engaging with social media makes you feel. So like the Facebook study found that engaging with Facebook posts which make you angry or frustrated changes your emotional state prior to competing, which then impacts on if you are feeling more angry and frustrated, you're more likely to do something that's more aggressive or stupid. So there are links that are starting to be identified between the way that social media makes people feel and then the subsequent impact on their performance. And it's not, some of your slightly more senior listeners, probably like myself, remember a world before this, and you might be thinking, well, why don't you just don't look at it, just don't engage? But actually, particularly with younger age group, there is a fear of missing out now. It's difficult to understand that they've grown up in a world with social media. Some of our younger demographics, they've grown up with phones. I mean, we still remember a world before that, so you can dip in and dip out a little bit, but their whole world has been shaped. I know in the UK, children have phones by the age of 11 generally, so it is very difficult for them to disengage, which is part of the problem. So it's a really big issue that we need to understand in more detail, but the evidence so far is pointing to the fact that it can have a seriously negative impact. There's a Canadian high jumper, I can't remember her name, who was reporting on the impact that trolls can have online to your ability to perform, because they say something, it impacts on you, it impacts on your ability to perform. And in the good old days, professional athletes just wouldn't read what the newspapers were printing about them for the very same reason, but it's a lot more difficult now for individual athletes to avoid, because you can't unsee things. We've all, I suppose the parallel is, we've all been there and checked our email outside of work when we shouldn't, and read that email that angers or frustrates us, and you can't unsee it. It has an impact on you, and how you react to other people and how you feel. So there are serious challenges around the impact of social media. So yeah, we know bits, but we don't know enough.
I think one of his main key points is that the research is lagging the technology. And, you and I just spoke a little bit earlier about how the TikTokification of social media has been something maybe in the last 6, 12, 18 months or so that's kind of really become the thing. Whereas, like the research that has been, that Stewart was citing was, maybe 10 years old, back in the day when like everyone was on Facebook and sharing photos of their breakfast and their holiday trips. And that's just doesn't really apply to kind of what's happening now. So I think his point that this is one big continuous live social experiment really resonated with me and concerning because we can't study it and do something about it and change it. It's evolving so fast that lag is something that we just need to acknowledge.
Yeah, I agree. Like by the time the study could be done, it's not published for probably 2 years, and who knows what's coming in 2 years and what teenagers are using and what platform they're using in 2 years. Like you look at how Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube and TikTok and Snapchat, they all kind of wax and wane over time. Their popularity sort of changes, and what kids are using in a few years more than others will be unknown. So that's where you probably the key. What I've taken away from this is that there's whatever social media use it is, that 3 hours a day, like that's a lot of time. Kids, recommended. I think it's like 2 hours maximum of screen time per day, and they're already exceeding that. Our house revolves on a no screens Monday to Friday, but then you can have a bit of 1 to 2 hours on the weekend. That's just us. That's how our family works. But for some kids to have a routine use of 3+ hours a day of screen time, and that's not just screen time, that's social media time as well. There's more screen time on top of that. So they're big concerns. But I think the message there is that it's got some detrimental effects, obviously on psychology and performance. And I like how they touched on trolls, because it's not just what you talked about before with the research papers showing if you scroll for 3 hours, your performance declines, or your love of sport changes, that kind of stuff. Like the trolls are a real thing, particularly with our athletes and professional athletes, that no doubt have a knock-on effect to their performance and how their mental health is as well. So yeah, it's a big issue.
It is a big issue, and I think that that for me there's different facets of what may affect people negatively. Like trolling is clearly one. People say nasty stuff and it affects people. Another one is social comparison, where you're just always seeing, or mainly seeing, people who are doing better stuff than you. I'm sure that particularly for athletes who want to perform, that can be very demotivating. But I think also, like with the pace of social media at the moment, how quickly things are served to you, mental fatigue is a significant thing. We all know how physical fatigue can affect athletic performance. And I put it to Stewart, can social media create mental fatigue? And if it does create mental fatigue, can that have a negative impact on performance? And this is what he's got to say.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things in there, Randall. So firstly, thinking is tiring. So your brain uses up to about 30% of the calories that you burn on any given day. Thinking is tiring. So the more you're engaging your brain, it's tiring. The more that you are looking at a small screen in particular is very tiring for your eyes, which again makes you feel tired and fatigued. Also, so one of the reasons why it's difficult to disengage is engaging in social media is it has the same effect on the brain as taking drugs or other stimulants. It releases dopamine. It's something that people become addicted to. That in itself over time becomes tiring. And actually anything that causes an emotional response is tiring, is fatiguing. Emotions, whatever the emotions are tiring. So if you are continually getting stimulated in that way, it is fatiguing you both mentally and emotionally. So even though you're not moving, it can reduce your alertness, your general activity and motivation levels, which would have a direct impact on performance. Lethargy is a challenge for lots of sports. So engaging in social media use prior to that does put you at risk of not being at the level that you need, or the intensity, or to be switched on or as focused as you need to be for performance. So there are some real issues there in engaging prior to performance. And interestingly, the research tells us that, again, the younger age groups, that 16 to 24 in particular, so they're averaging about 3 hours a day on social media. The biggest reason is boredom. It then becomes the thing, spending 3 hours a day, that stops you doing other things. So then you spend more time doing it because you don't have other hobbies and activities and ways to cope with the time that you've got. So then it becomes this circular prophecy, which you can't break out of. So it is a challenge in terms of the effect that it has, but the opportunity costs of being able to do other things, which might help you cope more effectively, is also a problem.
I have a friend who was a very high profile, very good swimmer. And I remember at the time, I won't name names, but I remember at the time he was the reigning world champion leading into Olympic Games and was supposed to win the gold medal at Olympic Games. And he came second. And this is before social media was a thing. And I remember speaking to him in depth about it afterwards. And I said, what do you think the reason was? You were favoured to win the gold medal. What was it? The final wasn't until that night. I spent the whole day thinking about it and I just burnt too much mental energy. I just got to the start blocks fatigued. And I think that's the reason that I lost the gold. And I reflect on that because of, when Stewart makes his comments there, it's like in modern life with social media, you can almost do this on a daily basis or almost like on an hourly basis where he's saying that, like you burn so much energy by kind of being online all the time, looking at these videos now. It just can't be good for your athletic performance. And I just think that, it's something that, it's I don't really have the words for it. It's just it's a concern for not only sport but for life in general that we're burning so much energy on these platforms.
Yeah, agree. The point that sort of really resonated with me was that's been found that a lot of 16 to 24-year-olds are using social media as a way to handle boredom, and that for me was like, oof. And then he discusses the crappy cycle that people can find themselves in. Like you're on social media for 3 hours a day, and that's your kind of way of dealing with boredom and not being able to do more constructive things to, maybe help for what it is that you're feeling bored. And like, for young kids who are maybe wanting to exercise or get better at something like that they want to, try to get better at, like, basketball training or soccer training, to waste 3 hours scrolling through social media, making you feel crappy, making you not feel good about yourself, and then missing that 3 hour window to then, go out there and kick a football or work on your skills or work on other things like, even just, reading or meditation or something else. Like it's, there's no perfect answers here, but that was a big sort of another, concerning moment that got raised there is how they're using social media, and the fact that they're using it to relieve themselves from boredom is a worry for me.
Yeah, no, I think being bored is good at times. It just allows you to think and be creative and be a little bit introspective at times. And I think they're really healthy things for people generally. I did ask Stewart about the difference between recreational athletes and professional athletes, because professional athletes can have a lot of people around them, can advise them, and that's like where a lot of these studies have been done. Versus people who are completely unregulated, don't have really anyone in their area other maybe than their parents or their friends. So I asked him about the difference between pros and recreational athletes. So this is what he's got to say.
Yeah, so you do see a little bit of a split between professional athletes and non-professional athletes, particularly in the bigger sports where they're going to earn more money because they'll have social media account managers. So the athletes themselves will not engage that much with their social media channels. So it's probably easier for them to disengage. They'll have someone that manages their posts, will respond to things, will filter information out so the athletes won't see that much. There is starting to be software solutions to this which will filter out, particularly for professional sports people, some of the trolling, some of the negative things, so it never makes it to the account of those individuals. So there is a little bit of protection out there now. So the professional athletes might well have someone who can do that for them. And then you have differences. So you can choose to not engage, and across all demographics, there are people who don't engage in social media, so they're fine. But then you get differences in what people engage in. So obviously, older demographics are far more likely to engage in things like Facebook. Younger demographics are more TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, a lot more picture focused, which in itself puts pressure on athletes, particularly in terms of body image. Increasing research showing that, again, particularly younger athletes, younger demographics will get advice via social media as well in terms of what they should eat, what they should train, which a lot of the time it's just unqualified people just making stuff up, but it has an impact on what people do. Body image for boys or young adult males in particular is becoming a real problem because of social media, body image issues, body dysmorphia, etc. So it is broad, the impact that social media can have. And again, I've mentioned younger demographics quite a lot, but the challenge for them is this, that they have grown up with this. So it's difficult to choose to engage to something that you are continually exposed to. And a lot of parents and guardians and coaches don't really understand how it works or the impact that it has, which gets really difficult. I coach track and field athletes, and it is difficult because I still remember, as I said, a world that was different. So I can't see the world through their eyes. So as coaches, we need to talk to our athletes and understand the world that they're living in and how it's impacting on them to try to help them, rather than just trying to apply our view of the world and the solutions that we might use, which won't necessarily work for them.
Stewart's point about the quality of advice and information that you can get on social media, I think is really pertinent. And I know for me, I don't know why I get served up this stuff, but at the moment, like I'm just getting all this nutrition stuff for some reason, and the variety, the rubbish that kind of comes through about how, some people are just fully keto and that's the way you got to live your life. And then other people is like, you cannot take more calories than you don't need and you should be eating potatoes and nothing else. It's just extraordinary, the difference, and also the unqualified crap that you get there. And for a younger person, this can just sink in and become the doctrine of their life. So I think Stewart's point about having to think about managing it and not eliminating it is very important.
Yeah. And conversely, like we know, those that are around social media know how the algorithm will kind of be fed in a way that you all of a sudden now end up in an echo chamber. So yes, you'll have, for us, we get polarizing views. Like for me, my algorithm at the moment is filled with conflicted views on exercise training, one style of training that's supposed to be better than the other. And then you got two groups of people arguing over which is best, and it gets exhausting. And then for obviously for us, because we know we can sift through the credibility of the people who are presenting that information. Someone who's a teenager, a younger athlete, is very influenced by the people that they're seeing on their screen. They end up more often than not in these echo chambers where they just get fed the same information. And whether or not that's right or wrong, it's a big issue when it's misinformation, and they just keep going through this continual cycle of being fed misinformation. That's where it's a big problem. Stewart raises the point that for you and I who grew up without social media, and we know a life without it. I really sort of agree that it's like with anything, we have to work with what you got. And if our kids and the teenagers that are out there playing today and the athletes we work with, that's all they know, we need to work with them, not against them. And we need to sort of find some strategies to help them thrive and not sort of, remove that thing that kind of is part of who they are. We just need to, as an older person, we just need to accept that's just the way it is. But I think it's just making it fit and making it work. And for us oldies, us boomers and us fossils just need to be a little bit more adaptive in the situation.
I don't consider myself a boomer or a fossil, mate, but at the same time, I totally hear your point. And Stewart's point,
these kids,
spot on as well.
They see the bald head.
People who they think you're very, very smart and mature, so I'm sure that's all they think. Stewart's point was that people who generally are in charge of sports teams are people around about our age and do remember a world without social media. So it's quite easy for us to kind of just say, forget it. And this has happened. Like we saw this at the last couple of Olympic Games where the Australian team has just banned any social media use for the whole time that they're there. But people are native to it. Younger people are native to it, and taking away it can actually be like a security blanket that's been taken away from them. So I dug into this a little bit more with Stewart, and he had some interesting insights.
Yeah, so I think you have to develop Like with other areas of our life, you need to develop healthy habits, and habits take time to form. So if you try to tell someone a week before a competition to change their behavior, it's never going to work. And actually, we know under pressure we revert back to our habits. So you need to develop these over a long period of time. In the same way that it takes time to develop skills, you need to with athletes, you can get them to disengage prior to training, for example, to start working right. So don't engage with social media for an hour before training or 2 hours, and you negotiate kind of what the rules are going to be, what the structure is going to be, and then practice that. And practice that over time. And actually, if you're in more structured teams, camps, etc., you can do that a little bit more formally. You can get people right. We want everyone to put their phones in this room, in this box, and we're not going to look at them for 2 hours. You can develop the skills and the ability to do what's required. But it takes time, it takes practice, because it's about forming habits, and habits are those things that you do automatically without thinking about it, which is why, whenever in a competition any coach has ever tried to give someone coaching points, it doesn't work, because you can't change things in an instant like that. But it's the same with social media use, and it's going to be different for different sports. It's going to have greater impact or lesser impact, so there's no one size fits all. But for that sport, it could be for team sports on game days, for example, phones get left at home. But it needs to be discussed and negotiated, particularly with adult athletes, because if you just try to impose something, it's never going to work. They'll hide the phone in the bag, just all the ways that people find around these things. But if it's a team thing, you can go through kind of team goal setting, team values setting the expectations for the team, include it as part of that in terms of what does this look like for us, and then develop the rules that work, and then allow people to develop the habits that will enable them to do that. But we're not going to stop people engaging in social media, and for the reasons that we've just said in terms of the health and the psychological impact that it can have. But we can shape how they engage with it, particularly in and around competitions. And I think if you can help them to understand why it's necessary, then that's crucial, how it can have an impact and how other people could impact how you feel, and then that's going to impact on how you perform. Then I think that's definitely the way to go. But it's through negotiation, it's through discussion.
I enjoyed those remarks, and when I listened to that back, I really feel like I think that where this will land in the near future will be that coaches and sports teams and people who are looking after active people social media and phone use will kind of be like any other aspect of training. So if you think that, if you're going to do an endurance event that you eat 3 hours before and you got a certain meal and that's the way that you do it, or you stretch only half an hour, you don't do dynamic stretches, you don't do static stretches, within 2 hours of this is what you do for recovery. I think that protocol with phones will start to become quite normal. And that is that the link between poor performance and phone use will be further acknowledged. And it's like, okay, these are the times you can use your phones. These are the times that you can't. Yes, it has to be negotiated on an individual level. But I thought his comments were very insightful and kind of probably shaping the future of where we're heading in sport.
Yep, agree. And I like how this has been also differentiated throughout the whole entire chat, that this isn't, kids staying up till midnight, the night before a game and being exhausted and having poor sleep quality and poor sleep duration. This is, chronic use throughout the day in important parts of the day, which then sort of lead into physical activity or sport performance. So, and often they too obviously go hand in hand, particularly if, you're having your daily use through the day and then all of a sudden you're staying up at night. So I agree. I couldn't agree more. I like how he's kind of working with social media and yeah, agree. I think the protocol that elite teams and professional athletes and Olympians will have moving forward will be one that, it kind of just, it fits within the training program, not excludes it.
So the last thing I asked Stewart was what's next? Where is his research going? Where does he think that the research in this area generally needs to head so we can understand it and learn from it more?
Yeah, great question. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got a couple of projects that are ongoing. There just isn't enough research. So we need studies looking in professional sports. I'm in discussions at the moment with some professional football or soccer teams here in the UK to look at doing some work with their academy athletes. Firstly, to understand the scale of the problem, to then be able to look at implementing solutions and to look at that across the board, because there are bits and pieces of studies, but they're really based on where people can get access to participants for their research, so that it's not the things that you would strategically think, right, this is what we need to know. So we need studies working with professional or young professional athletes. We need to look at different demographics, because again, there isn't that across the board. It's not going to be a one size fits all. So we need to understand there could be gender differences on this. So it's important to look at that as well. There could be cultural differences. I already mentioned there could be differences across sport. There is so much that we don't know, that we need to understand. And the qualitative research is actually quite easy to do in terms of asking people, do you think this is having an impact? Which is valid in itself, because if you think something's having an impact, then it is. But trying to be able to get access to data that's going to help really to look at this in detail is the next crucial step. And obviously there are questions there around the data protection, sharing data, etc., which aren't insurmountable. They just need to be thought through in terms of how we resolve that. But I would think, particularly for academy-based sports, so that conveyor belt coming into adult teams, I think there is a real gap and opportunity there to understand, because they are both the athletes of the future, but developmentally, that's a period in their journey where they're going to be influenced massively, and we'll be setting the expectations as well. So there really isn't a lot of comprehensive research in this area, but so we need a lot of research looking at different sports, different populations, different genders, just to see whether it's all the same. It is different in some of those different environments, which then helps us to shape the solutions, which are ultimately what I'm most interested in. How do we help people to kind of cope with this or use it in a positive way? Because actually, if you see positive things, that could be beneficial. We just need to be able to answer some of these questions.
He's very articulate and well-spoken, isn't he, Stewart? He's very, particularly for someone whose field is psychology.
Unreal.
I find him very, very clear and very easy to listen to. But I think that, like in summary, it's social media can be good and it can be great, but it's not inherently bad. But I think the message that's kind of come through with everything today is that it's all got to do with timing, intention and balance. And the other point that I'd like to make is that, a lot of the discussion's been around young people and also pro athletes, whatever, but it affects everyday people as well. I'm sure there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast who just enjoy exercise and want to keep fit and just perform at their best, even if they're just looking to run 10Ks under an hour. And I think that these things apply to everyone as much as they do. What are your takeaways, Mick?
Yeah, I agree. Takeaways for me, I've really learnt, agree, Stewart, well spoken, really clear points. The big ones for me were clearly that when you sort of put the topic forward, I was just imagining social media and its effect on performance being, this sort of late night scroller, this teenage kid that stays behind their closed door, staying up till midnight, kind of stuff. Whereas this was a completely different picture for me. This was that direct influence on their performance within the next hour or two. So I took a lot away from that and how we can make better use of our time and obviously remove that part of the negative performance out of the equation, move social media altogether or smartphones or tablets. So that was my big one. But I've also, the lessons learnt from that also too is the scrolling. Like I said before, I've caught myself many times, on a daily basis, spending too much time. So I think there's messages there that not only apply to sport, but to work, to life, to family, to training, to all sorts of different things. So I probably, my take-home message here is, everyone probably just have a sort of, stock take of how much time they've spent mindlessly scrolling, and is there ways you can cut it back? Maybe not eradicate it straight away, but, can we cut it in half? Can you cut it down to a quarter and slowly kind of phase it out? I think cold turkey never works for a lot of different things when you're giving up a habit. So it's just trying to find reduce the volume. That'll be my big ones.
Yeah, there's some nice takeaways, Mick. Anyway, that's a wrap for this episode of Exercise Matters. If you enjoyed the chat, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your mates. A quick disclaimer, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical or individual advice. Always seek guidance from a qualified health professional for your specific needs. Big thanks to our sponsors, Premax, High Performance Skincare for high performance people, and Learn.physio, world-class education for health professionals. Catch you next time.
See you next week.